In order to accomplish anything in this life, you have to be willing to put in the work over time and never stop.
Dreams are what we came to bear. Dreams are somewhat of a prayer. Dreams are possible if we refuse to see them as quite rare. What are you seeing in your mind? 'Cause you need to be aware. Stop pretending that you're worthless. It is time for you to clear.
I want to welcome you all to another episode of the Infinite Beings podcast. And I have been thinking a lot about the power of compound interest. There are many people who esteem compound interest as the eighth wonder of the world because you can literally do anything when you apply this principle to your life. If you want to lose weight, if you continue to eat well every day and work out on a very regular basis, you're going to look up one day and you will have lost a lot of weight. Why? Because it's those little actions that you do every single day that are going to get you where you want to go. I think a lot of people, especially in our culture, they want rapid success. But the reality is that most things don't happen rapidly, okay? An overnight success is generally 10 years in the making, okay? We see the end result of this person who now is very successful and they are everywhere, but you have to think about what it took for them to get there. Now, a person who comes to mind because they recently dropped an album, and by recently, I mean today, is Sabrina Carpenter. I actually saw a video on her the other day where it was talking about how she has been in this industry for 10 years grinding, but it's only now that she's really getting her flowers. Earlier in the year, we saw that she had a huge hit with Espresso, and now she has her album coming out and it's getting good reviews on it. I mean, obviously it only came out today or last night, so I'm sure we're gonna see those reviews come out over the next few days and weeks. Another person I'd like to throw in there is Chappell Roan, okay? People on the internet are like, oh, where did this girl come from? She's so entitled, she's this, because she's asking for boundaries and for people not to think that they own her, which I think is realistic. But she's been in this industry for over 5 years herself. She was in LA and was signed by a label, then got dropped by a label, then moved back to the Midwest, and then literally self-funded her entire album, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess, which is an incredible album, okay? I probably listen to that album every day lately. I didn't listen to it yesterday, but for the most part, I'll listen to it a few times a week. It's a really great project, but it's because she created it, okay? She wasn't dependent upon the label to make her dreams happen. She was dependent upon herself to make it happen. And the same can be said about a Nicki Minaj, all right? We've all seen the videos of Nicki rapping on the street, just trying to prove herself as a rapper, authentically growing her fan base or her stan base, her cult base. And it's like, no wonder she has the success that she has today. She's been working for it. You cannot expect to just pop out and be a superstar if you're not putting in the work that it takes to become a superstar. And it's very frustrating to me because it's like, why are you expecting to be this person when you haven't earned it? In my humble opinion, I think the thing that's working against most people is entitlement culture. You don't want to do the work, but you feel entitled to the success of someone who has done the work. How does that work? And another thing that is currently happening right now, or happened last night, is that Lil Yachty kind of crashed out on IG Live because he was frustrated by the fact that he's essentially being used by many of his friends around him, which, by the way, you chose your friends, bro. So at the end of the day, you do have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, why is it that I have these people in my life if I feel like they're using me? On some level, he wants to be used. So there's that. But if you are literally providing the platform for people's entire careers, and specifically I'm talking about Caribou because he shared that he wrote all of her raps, he dressed her, she lived in his house, all these different things. And she was not a kind person. She wasn't a gracious person. She allowed her head to get so elevated when it came to the fame that she was finding online. And she kind of just shat on everything that he did for her. And I think there are aspects of this story where it's like, okay, I see where she's very wrong, but I also see where Lil Yachty is wrong because, dude, come on. You have to use better discernment. And also, it's not a good look to be like, I gave you your career. I gave you your career. It makes you look like an egomaniac. And I get the frustration of wanting to help people and then those people not respecting the help that you gave them. But I think there's a better way to deal with your emotions than to explode and crash out online. And I think one of the best ways that you can actually crash out as a creative is to channel all of your frustrations into your creativity, because I know that I have been there, okay? Life gets super fucking frustrating. Anybody who says that life doesn't get frustrating at times is literally lying to themselves, okay? We all have moments where we feel so frustrated and all we want to do is explode. All we want to do is just lay it out on the line, every wrong that every person has ever committed to us. But that only makes us look crazy, and it only makes us look like we are not the type of person who is emotionally regulated and who can really handle the pressures that come with success. Because there are always going to be people who try to play with you, who try to get you in your feelings, who try to undermine you and paint you as this person that maybe I guess you are, right? If someone can really get to you like that, then that says a lot about you. It says that you can't handle the pressure. And part of wanting to be a success in the world is being able to deal with that pressure. And when it comes to someone like Drake, I really admire Drake because he was able to crash out over a beat. Same as Nicki too, but I think sometimes Nicki does go a little crazy, especially on her station head program thing. And it can be a lot. But when it comes to Drake, he really doesn't say anything about anything, okay? Unless it was the rap beef that he had with Kendrick Lamar. Even Kendrick Lamar, respectable, right? Because he's had these feelings when it comes to Drake, but what he decided to do is crash out over a beat. And that's how you have to do it, right? Because you're channeling your frustration into your creativity, and that is a productive use of that energy. And I just wish people would do that more as opposed to blowing up on everyone. Because yeah, after you blow up on everyone, it feels good, but how are people going to feel after that when it comes to you? They are going to paint a narrative about you, and it's going to be very hard for you to rescue your image per se because of the very visible crash out that you had. And again, this is why I think it's so incredibly important to have emotional mastery and to recognize the role that you play in your life and to not see yourself as a victim. And again, this is where the power of compound interest comes into play, because when you have practices that you enlist every single day that help you to emotionally regulate yourself, it's going to be much easier for you to deal with frustration versus allowing those things to build up over time. And let's be honest here, okay? What leads to a crash out? Well, what leads to a crash out is that over time, instead of being honest with yourself about the issues that you have with yourself, the issues that you have with other people, you instead let it build up over time, and then one day you just explode, okay? Versus if every time something frustrated you on a daily basis, you sat down, you wrote in your journal, you went on a run, you did a meditation, you made a song, you created a video, you painted and just threw paint at a wall, you went to a gun range, you just shot some guns, you did something that was a productive use of your energy, you would never have a moment where you flipped out like that. Because along the way, every single day, you had practices in place that enabled you to deal with your frustrations in a productive way. And I'm not going to sit here and act like I've never crashed out before. I 100% have crashed out before. But one of the things that I've learned is that it's not productive. And you think that it's helping, but it actually makes things so much worse for you. And it's very hard to recover from a crash out because it's usually going to take time. But what is dependent upon you recovering from a crash out is how you look at the crash out, the after effects of it, and the practices that you put in place, the tools that you have so that you don't end up in that situation again. Okay. One of the books that I started reading again is called The Slight Edge. And the slight edge is literally compound interest. Okay. Time. And everything that I've been talking about right now is essentially what this book talks about. But I think it's a really useful book to pick up because all the stories and all of the other info and suggestions really help you to conceptualize how important it is to enlist the help of the slight edge when it comes to your life and the dreams that you have for your life, the goals that you have for your life, the aspirations that you have for your life. So I thought this was a very interesting quote. So I'm going to share a few quotes. So it says, there's a popular expression you've probably heard. Luck is preparedness meeting opportunity. It's a handy idea, but it's not quite accurate. People who live by the slight edge understand how luck really works. It's not preparedness meeting opportunity. It's preparedness, period. Preparedness created by doing those simple, little, constructive, positive actions over and over. Luck is when that constancy of preparedness eventually creates opportunity. So when it comes to Lil Yachty discussing Caribou and how he essentially gave her her career, he wrote all her raps, he dressed her, she lived at his house, she was never really putting in the work to become a rapper, okay? And what I think is very interesting about that is in an interview, she said that she actually wanted to be an actor, and she was acting as a rapper, because if you can't write your raps, which by the way, I think rap is an art form and you should not call yourself a rapper if you cannot write a rap. Like, to me, that doesn't even make sense. But in today's day and age, it seems like we have really warped a lot of things. And I think a lot of the musicians today are not even necessarily musicians. They're actors playing the role of musician, which is crazy. So I believe she's definitely well poised to become an actor if she was acting as a rapper. So hopefully that's her next career arc. But given that he also mentioned that she wasn't the kindest person, we'll see. At the end of the day, you have to put in the work in order to get to where you want to go, so that no one can come out and say, I gave you this, I gave you that, because then that is the truth, right? If you haven't been putting the time into your craft, then you can't really say that you are a craftsman, because you're not. You're literally acting like a craftsman. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of the art today, whether it's music, whether it's movies, they don't feel like they have that thing, right? And it's because these people aren't true creatives. Obviously, I'm not saying all of them, but many of them aren't true creatives. And that's an issue, right? Because everything's fake, essentially. And I think that's one of the major reasons why I really love Chappell Roan and have been playing so much of her music, because she's a true artist, you know, and you can just sense it. You feel it in her music. You feel it in her image. Everything feels so authentic. It doesn't feel like a label came to her and said, hey, we want to make a pop star. Will you volunteer as tribute? It feels like she's been putting in the work. And I think that is what we're missing from the culture. And I get so frustrated when it comes to these things because I don't understand when it became cool to not put in the work towards your dreams. You can't just be handed everything on a silver platter. It feels so much better when you know that you've been working towards something for so long. I think about myself, okay? I didn't just start this podcast and it was my first podcast. I have been working at the podcast game for years, okay? I've been working at the content game for years. The first time I created a piece of content was in 2020, all right? I have been living in my parents' house. I had been flip-flopping between, do I want to do tech still? Do I want to still create content? All along the way, continuing to create content in my off times. I've been willing to sacrifice my life, my time, my energy to put into me creating content, to put into me becoming a better musician, to put into learning the drums, to put into vocal workouts, especially lately. And you know what? I know that I'm going to get to a certain point in time because of the power of compound interest where all of that is going to help me become the artist that I want to be. And that's the thing, right? You have to put in the fucking time. Like, I'm sorry. I'm so tired of these entitled ass people who are not willing to put in the work, but want the results of a superstar. You don't deserve it. I'm sorry. If you're not putting in the work to become the superstar, you don't fucking deserve it. And one of the major lessons that I learned was that going viral is not the goal. You do not want to go viral and hop on trends and all that stuff if it is not authentic to you and if it is not in alignment with the community that you want to create. Because as soon as that viral moment is done, people are going to leave because there's no substance for them to stick around for. So why on earth are you expecting to have a certain lifestyle to be regarded as someone who is worthy of other people's attention if you don't even believe that your craft is worthy of your own attention? Like, that shit honestly blows minds, okay? It blows minds. So I want to read another quote from this book, and it says, "One reason the slight edge is so widely ignored, unnoticed, and undervalued is that our culture tends to worship the idea of the big break. We celebrate that dramatic discovery, the big breakthrough that catapults the hero into a new place. In other words, we buy lottery tickets. The truth of breakthroughs and lucky breaks is that, yes, they do happen, but they don't happen out of thin air. They are grown like a crop, planted, cultivated, and ultimately harvested. The problem is, as I mentioned last chapter, that in our culture, we're trained to think we can skip over the middle step and leap directly from plant to harvest. We even have a term for it. We call it a quantum leap, and it's a complete, utter myth." So I was thinking about the course that I was in as I was reading this last night. And the reason that I was, because I remember in one of the teachings, she was saying that, okay, well, in our marketing, we want to sell that we're going to collapse time and help them accomplish their goals and dreams quicker. And I was really thinking about this because I'm like, that is honestly very dishonest because it takes time to create the life that you want. It's not going to happen in 3 months. It's not going to happen in 6 months. It's going to take years to do it. And if you are selling a service or a product saying that it's going to get you there in 3 months, in a month, whatever, I just think that it is very disingenuous. And I can only see it now that I think a lot of the personal development, self-growth, or self-improvement industry is full of a lot of rhetoric that tries to get you to think that change can happen overnight. And I just am seeing that it doesn't, okay? You have to put in the time in order to get where you want to get, okay? I started this podcast in May, and I probably get a few views each podcast episode, but I'm not even really focused on that, okay? Because I understand that it takes time. Things take time. If you want something of substance, something that is valuable, you are going to have to put the time in. You just really are. You can't expect things to happen overnight. And it's very frustrating that people believe that things can happen overnight. But again, like this said, it is in our culture's DNA that we put the quantum leap on a pedestal when in all actuality, that's not how it works, okay? So I want to read another little snippet from here, and it says, people want to walk over coals, break boards, scream primally, and have their entire lives change because they wrote down a vision statement on a piece of paper at a weekend seminar. But that's not how things really work. Let's look for a moment at how things do really work. Let's consider some real world problems that would have made Peter Pan or Captain Kirk or any other fictional hero pull his hair out. For example, let's look at the history of slavery and emancipation. Here we were, a brand new nation, beacon of the Enlightenment, a bold experiment in idealism and the proposition that all human beings are created equal. And meanwhile, we were keeping a few million human beings in chains to do our work for us. How was that supposed to add up? And we weren't the only ones. In fact, we learned it from the English and brought the idea with us across the Atlantic on the Mayflower. In the mid-18th century, as the new nation on this side of the pond was just still going through its teething years under President Washington, a parliamentary politician named William Wilberforce decided the world had had enough of slavery, and he meant to see it stopped. In terms of the vested economic interests and psychological resistance this idea faced, accomplishing it would be something like cutting a new Grand Canyon with a fork. But Wilberforce had an innate appreciation of the slight edge. Year after year, bill after bill, Wilberforce spent his entire career introducing an endless series of legislative proposals to his colleagues in the British Parliament in his efforts to end slavery, only to have them defeated one after the other. From 1788 to 1806, he introduced a new anti-slavery motion and watched it fail every single year for 18 years in a row. Think about that. 18 years in a row he failed, but he kept going. Like, that's insane. How many people are doing that today? How many people are doing that today? Another person who's been working in the music industry for years but just started to receive a big break last year was Victoria Monet, okay? You have to do shit for a long time. You have to really want to do it before you can expect to receive any semblance of success, okay? If you're receiving success automatically when you start something, it is generally a fluke. Can you sustain it? That's why a lot of times I do think that it's not a good thing when you go viral your first post or your 10th post, because then it sets up unrealistic expectations for you and what you believe it takes to be successful. You have to have the years of work going into it. You have to have an appreciation for the grind before you can really step into it and sustain it. Finally, the water wore down the rock. 3 days before Wilberforce's death in 1833, Parliament passed a bill to abolish slavery, not only in England, but also throughout its colonies. 3 decades later, a similar bill passed in the United States, spearheaded by another man of conscience who had also spent much of his life failing, a patient Illinois lawyer named Abraham. Deus ex machina? Far from it. These weren't solutions that dropped out of the blue sky. They were the sudden result of long, patient years of tireless, repeated effort. There was no fictional deus ex machina happening here. These were human problems, and they had human solutions. But the only access to them was through the slight edge. Of course, Wilberforce and Lincoln were not the sole figures in this heroic struggle. And even after their bills were passed into law on both sides of the Atlantic, the evils of slavery and racism were far from over. Rome wasn't rehabilitated in a day or even a century, but their efforts, like Mother Teresa's efforts to end poverty, Gandhi's to end colonial oppression, or Martin Luther King's and Nelson Mandela's to end racism, are classic examples of what breakthrough looks like in the real world. All of these real-life heroes understood the slight edge. None of them were hypnotized by the allure of the big break. If they had been, they would never have continued taking the actions they took. And what would the world look like today? And see, this is the thing, right? We only see the highlight reel when it comes to most of these things. On social media especially, okay? It literally lives, breathes, dies off of the highlight reel. Everybody wants to be famous, but what are you going to be famous for? What is the point of fame if you're not wielding your fame to push a vision? And I think that's my major issue with a lot of the people who are famous today. People do the most ridiculous shit to become famous, but then you hear about them today and then they're gone tomorrow, okay? And I know that Drake has a line from his song Pound Cake that is a sample where it says, here today, gone tomorrow, because it's true. Most people are going to be here today and gone tomorrow if they're trying to be trendy, if they're just trying to pop off and they just want their ego to be stroked by fame. But there's a lot that comes with fame, okay? And again, I think Chappell Roan is an example of this. When you've been working for years at your craft and you create a beautiful album that connects with a lot of people, that comes with fame, and that comes with people thinking that they own you and that every time they see you in public, you have to take a picture with them. And if you have not been building yourself up and can handle that amount of public scrutiny, of paparazzi, of people wanting to stalk you and all that stuff, fame is going to be the worst thing ever for you. And I don't think a lot of people really think about that. Like, they literally just think about the fact that people will know their name. But if people know your name and it's not for something of value, literally, what's the point? What's the point? I don't want fame if it's not because I'm doing something of value and I have a message to share and I want to amplify it into the world. That's the only reason that you should want fame. Literally the only reason. You want to create a product or service, a movement that you want to share with as many people as possible. That's the only reason to want fame. Every other reason, oh, I want people to know me. I want people to take pictures of me. I want people to do this and do that. That's such a shallow reason for that. And I think that is my major issue with this culture today. People are so incredibly egotistical. They are so freaking insane. Like, they just want instant gratification all the time. What the fuck are you doing? Why should I pay attention to you? Why should I pay attention to you? Because I think most people are not worthy of the attention that they have. Actually, I won't say most people, but I'll say most of the people who are popping on social media are not necessarily worthy of the attention that they have if they're not someone who is actually building a community and has been putting in the work for years, okay? If you're not being consistent in what you're doing, if you're not clear on where you want to go and you're being smart with your money and you're being smart about working at your craft every single day so that you can really bring the best to the community who supports you, what the fuck are you doing here? What the fuck are you doing here? I don't understand. Another quote from this book: our cultural mythology, the philosophy our society subscribes to as a group, worships the quantum leap breakthrough, even when we don't realize that's what we're doing. One small step for a man. Wait a second. That wasn't one small step. This guy was walking on the moon, for crying out loud. And we were all watching it on television with Walter Cronkite narrating. I know, I'm revealing my age. This wasn't a small anything. It was one gigantic step for man, a genuine breakthrough. Whether or not you believe in the moon's landing is not the point here, okay? The small step was when some guy, someone you and I never heard of and probably never will, first started tinkering with design ideas for how a rocket ship might withstand the intense conditions of space flight. There were thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of one small steps for years and years beforehand that all went into that epic 1969 leap of Neil Armstrong's that was televised throughout the world and is still played over and over in our culture as one of the most deeply ingrained news bites of history. Here is a great secret that holds the key to great accomplishment. Both that sudden flash and that overnight success were the final breakthrough results of a long, patient process of edge upon edge upon edge. Anytime you see what looks like a breakthrough, it is always the end result of a long series of little things done consistently over time. No success is immediate or instantaneous. No collapse is sudden or precipitous. They are both products of the slight edge. And that is what I was trying to say when it came to Yachty blowing up. This has been something that has been coming for him for a while. And I don't say that in a like, oh, ha, 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 like he deserves this. I'm not saying he deserves this. I'm saying that his frustrations building up over time is what led to him going on live and saying all these things, because he's been frustrated this whole time every day with these people and he hasn't been really addressing it. Okay. And it led to what happened. And I hope that he is able to overcome this, because again, I don't think any person is bad, all right? And I think if you're the type of person who looks at a celebrity crashing out or anybody crashing out and you immediately cast judgment on them and say, oh, how could they do that? Like, I would never do that. Put yourself in their position. Oh, wait, you fucking can't. So don't say shit. Like, I will never talk shit about someone going through something, because until I've walked a mile in their fucking shoes, I have no space to say anything about anyone. And I hope that you feel the same way, because if and when that moment comes for you and all of your years of not dealing with your issues or not being honest with yourself comes to a head and you crash out, I mean, what can you do? You know, you have to give people grace. And I will always stand on the side of giving people grace, because ultimately I want grace for myself. I want to assume that people are trying to do the best that they can and that they have good intentions and that they want to help people. But sometimes you get it wrong. Sometimes you think a person who's your friend is your friend, but they're not really your friend. And are you going to be a victim to that? Or are you just going to take that on the chest and be smarter next time? And I know when it comes to me in my life, I've had to take that on the chest, and I've just had to realize that I have to be smarter about the people that I allow into my life and the activities that I'm personally doing on a daily basis. That's the only thing I can do. That's the only thing any of us can do. We have to look at our own actions and think about whether or not they are helping us or hurting us. And in all honesty, a lot of the actions that are promoted in society today are not helpful. Like, they're not helpful whatsoever. If you want fast money and you think becoming an OF model or becoming a scammer or doing something that gives you fast money is the way, that is not going to end well. It usually doesn't end well. Your better bet is to be smart about saving 10% of all the money that enters your bank account and putting it in a high yield savings account where the interest rates are currently 5% or more from certain companies, and then allowing that to accrue over years and years and years, allow the effect of compound interest to come into play. And if you do that starting at 20, by the time you're 60, you're going to have a good amount of money in there, and you'll be able to really live the life that you want to live because you're adopting that slight edge mentality and enabling compound interest to work in your favor. It's all about living your life in that way and not expecting that a big breakthrough is going to change your life, because if you haven't changed your mindset when it comes to things and you're not willing to put in the work, it doesn't matter how big the breakthrough is, you're going to fumble it some way or another. Lastly, I wanted to say this quote from the book. Now, I'm not saying that quantum leaps are a myth because they don't really happen. As a matter of fact, they do happen, just not the way people think they do. The term comes from particle physics, and here's what it means in reality. A true quantum leap is what happens when a subatomic particle suddenly jumps to a higher level of energy, but it happens as a result of the gradual buildup of potential caused by energy being applied to that particle over time. In other words, it doesn't just suddenly happen. An actual quantum leap is something that finally happens after a lengthy accumulation of slight edge effort. Exactly the way the water hyacinth moves from day 29 to day 30. Exactly the way the frog's certain death by drowning was suddenly transformed into salvation by butter. A real-life quantum leap is not Superman leaping a tall building. A real-life quantum leap is Edison perfecting the electric light bulb after 1,000 patient efforts and then transforming the world with it. If you want your life to become something incredible, you have to give yourself the time for that to happen. Stop expecting for things to happen immediately. Give yourself the space to be a craftsman, to work at your craft, and become so fucking good that people can't ignore it. Because when you know that you worked hard to get to where you're at, no one can ever fucking take that away from you. No one. And that's what you should aim for. If you like this episode, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, link is in the description. If you want to give a one-time donation to my PayPal, that link is in the description as well. I will see you all in the next one.
Days and so confused, don't really know what's meant to do when it's killing you. But think about what I am feeling, it's not just you. Maybe check up on me and practice servitude. Days and so confused, don't really know what's meant to do when it's killing you. But think about what I am feeling, it's not just you. Maybe check up on me and practice servitude.